What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we need to take a little bit of a look at another bunch of cards which are going to be coming around in Worlds Collide, the new Keyforge expansion. You see, there are a whole bunch of cards, well, 4 or 5 depending how you look at it anyway, that actually get to enter play ready. Now, the general rule of Keyforge is that when you play a creature, it enters play exhausted, and then at the end of your turn you ready up all of your creatures and artifacts incidentally, and then you're off and ready to go from the next turn. Well, turns out there are a bunch of creatures over in Worlds Collide that are frankly, I suppose impatient would be the way to put it. So they like coming into play ready, and I thought, right, well, that makes a nice little topic for a video. So let's have a gander, shall we? Now, starting off, we got a couple of Bramble creatures, but saying a couple is a little bit of a misnomer. We've got Alaka and Mega Alaka. Now, the reason it's a little bit of a misnomer here is because Alaka is a creature, and then if you get Alaka's Brew in the set or in your deck, you also end up with Mega Alaka. It's very much a kind of special rare kind of deal, so they're not really two separate creatures, but they are two separate creatures, if that makes any kind of sense. And the deal here very simply is that if you've used a creature to fight this turn, then Alaka enters play ready. That's kind of cool. Now, Bramble is the fighty house, so they're not so great at stealing amber or any of that rubbish, but they are pretty gosh darn good at fighting. Now, the thing that this does is it stops you playing a bunch of creatures in a row, including Alaka, and then Alaka being ready. It means you've got to have a creature that is ready at the beginning of your turn, such that you may fight with it, and then Alaka enters play ready. It means that if you really want to reap, you've then got to make a choice between do I reap, and then get Alaka in exhausted, or fight and get Alaka in ready. I mean, generally speaking, you might as well fight, because if you really want the amber from reaping, you can get that by reaping with Alaka. Now, the problem here is, if your creature is going to be destroyed if you fight with it. That's the biggest issue here. Because if it was going to be destroyed, then you fight with it, it gets destroyed, and Alaka comes in, but you've already lost a creature. That is a little bit of an issue. One of the great things about coming into play ready, and we saw this with Silvertooth right back in Call of the Archons. Even if it's a rubbishy creature, and Alaka's a 4-power creature, it's fine. Silvertooth was 2 power, that's pretty rubbish. But even if all you do is play it, and then reap and gain an amber, and then move on to something else, and then it gets destroyed, you've at least gotten some value from it, and I think that's what's so kind of awesome about this. So that's Alaka, but we've also got Crash Muldoon in the Grand Star Alliance. Now, this is a 3-power creature, so we're not expecting him to last all that long. But you have deploy, which means that when you play it, you may play it anywhere you like in the battlefield. There's no, you must play it on one flank malarkey going on here. No, you're good to roll. And this is very relevant, because it has an action whereby you may use a neighbouring non-Star Alliance creature. Now, the thing is, this is an action, which means all you do is exhaust Crash Muldoon. You don't gain any amber, you don't fight to take out another creature. You exhaust Crash, and then you get to use a neighbouring creature. What it essentially allows you to do is use it instead of Crash. But you enter play ready. And what's great about this is, unlike Alaka where you've got to have fought and blah blah blah, this just enters play ready. No mucking about, no fancy footing, none of that rubbish. You play it, it's ready, and then you can either reap with Crash, or you can fight with him, or you can use a neighbouring non-Star Alliance creature, except remember that you've got deploy here, so you can put it anywhere you like, and at least the turn you play it, you can use any creature you like on your battle line. Now, it does say use, it doesn't say ready and use, so if for some reason you've got an exhausted non-Star Alliance creature, that won't work. But this is phenomenal. Chain Gang's got an action that steals an amber. That's quite good. Stealing amber is nice. It helps you to get closer to winning the game. Maybe you cannot do that with any of your Grand Star Alliance creatures. That's all right. Play this down next to Chain Gang with deploy. It enters play ready. Use the action, and then you can use Chain Gang to steal an amber. That is just one of like a billion different options you've got here. But it is a rather nice one. It allows you to bring aspects into your Grand Star Alliance suite that you usually wouldn't have. Moving over into Untamed, we've got the wonderfully named and wonderfully drawn Bramble Lynx. Again, it's a free power creature, but the good news is that it's got skirmish. That is to say, if you start a fight with Bramble Lynx, you will survive the fight. If your opponent attacks you, unfortunately, you gain no real advantage here, boo hiss, etc. But as long as you start the fight on your turn, you're good to go, and you're going to survive it. So that's quite nice. And if you've used a creature to reap this turn, Bramble Lynx enters play ready. Now, this is what I really like. This is, well, I think this might be my favourite one of them. Because you see, one of two things can happen here. Either you can Amber Rush, or you can get a cheeky KO out of nowhere. Now, in terms of the Amber Rushing, you reap to gain an Amber, then you play Bramble Lynx, then you just reap again, and you've essentially gained 2 Amber rather than 1. That's rather lovely. And incidentally, I like this more than I do with Alaka. With Alaka, you're forced to fight in order to get it into play ready, and you don't always want to fight. Sometimes fighting will lead your creature to being destroyed. That's a bad thing. Sometimes your opponent literally has no creatures to fight, and if your opponent has no creatures to fight, you can't fight anyone. There's no one there to fight. Whereas at least if you're being forced to reap, you're gaining an Amber. Nothing bad happens from reaping. No, that's not strictly true. Let's say you're playing against an Amber Spine Mongrel, for argument's sake. Well, basically that says that if your opponent uses a creature to reap, you also gain an Amber. Well, what if your opponent's got like 5 Amber, and then you reap, and they've got an Amber Spine Mongrel, and then they gain an Amber, and that puts them on check? That is a possibility. As a side note, Amber Spine Mongrel is not in Worlds Collide, so you would essentially have to be playing against an Age of Ascension deck to find this. So okay, there are some occasional very small downsides to reaping, but generally not. If your opponent doesn't have any creatures, you can still reap. If your opponent's got a bunch of big creatures and you don't want your creature to be destroyed, you can still reap safely. So it's alright. And then you get this coming in, your Lynxy boy. That's definitely what I'm calling it from now on. And Lynxy boy can either reap, or you can fight, and you've got skirmish. So if you can find your opponent with a creature you want to destroy with 1, 2, or 3 power, Lynxy boy can come in and just immediately take it out. And that can be huge, because you might have only small creatures on the field. You might not have anyone that can actually take out your opponent's creature, or at least not without being taken out yourself. Let's say you've got a Taliga on the field. Well, Taliga could take out a 3 power creature, but then would get destroyed in return, and Taliga's amazing because each time your opponent plays a creature, you gain an Amber. So what you do instead is you use Taliga to reap. In comes Lynxy boy, and now you can take it out with Lynxy boy, and all of a sudden you're not losing anything because of the skirmish. It's amazing. Now the final one is one we've seen before. It is the Grim Reaper, one of the anomalies coming out in Worlds Collide, and it's a 4 power creature, but it reads, if you are haunted, the Grim Reaper enters play ready. Now this is a completely new mechanic that did not exist before Worlds Collide, and essentially, you are haunted if there are 10 or more cards in your discard pile. Now remember that when you run out of deck, your discard pile shuffles up and becomes your deck, so essentially very early on at the beginning of the game, you won't enter play ready. And right after you've reshuffled your deck, you might have to wait a couple of turns in order to then enter play ready. But outside of that, I think you'll probably be alright. Certainly, there will be times you have to play it. And look, it's rarely, and sometimes it will be, but it is rarely worth stashing a card in your hand waiting for later. And certainly you would never want to stash this in your hand. Because if you keep it in your hand, then that means that you're drawing essentially one fewer card at the end of your turn. And you might as well just play it because it'll be ready next turn anyway. So you're not going to keep this to wait until it enters play ready. This is going to be one of those, either you draw it, and then, I mean, obviously you play it at the end of your turn when you've got the largest discard possible. Unless, of course, you're going to be shuffling up mid-turn, in which case you play it right before then. But generally speaking, either you have got 10 cards in your discard, yay, and enters play ready, or you don't, boo, it doesn't. You're rarely going to be able to manipulate it too much, aside from just playing a couple of extra cards during your turn. It's a nice bonus. Incidentally, the Grim Reaper, when you reap, you purge an enemy creature and a friendly creature. This could really backfire. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Those are the creatures in Worlds Collide that enter play ready. And I'd like to know which one of those you're excited for, which is your favourite, and what you think of them all. So let me know in the comments section. Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk about games and things of that nature. And do please consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.